Hi, I'm Nush from YB Aligned, and for today's Movement Monday, we're going to be looking at the neck. Usually within Movement Monday videos, I am focusing on the movements available within a specific joint or body part. However, I have actually covered this in the neck already. If you flick back to cervical spine, it's a great one. Be sure to catch it. So instead today, I'm actually wanting to focus on the impact the head has on the neck, and also the fact that we have several vertebrae in there, and quite often we're moving just from one. Let's look at the impact of the head on the neck. As you can see below in this diagram, when the head is resting above the body, it's weighing about 5 kilos or 11 pounds. However, with just 15 degrees of bend in the neck or head forward, it goes up to 12 kilos or 27 pounds. And then it just gets progressively more the more our head is tilted forward or the more bend we have in our neck. And it's because of this weight and impact that we don't want to have a head that's forward or bend in our neck. We want our ear to be sitting over our shoulders, so our head is supported. So how do we get our head back over our body? Well, the body's got something called proprioception, which is essentially where a body part knows where it is in space. And our head, without any feedback, doesn't really know always where it is in space or where it is in relation to the rest of our body. So that's why we're going to come and use a wall. So it's just a normal wall, and you're going to have your heels about 2 inches away from the wall with your feet hip width apart. And that's just so we've got a really nice base of support. And your bottom and your shoulders are going to be touching the wall. And then you're also going to have your head flat against the wall. And I want you to think about the whole back of your head trying to touch the wall. And then in order to stimulate that head and let it know where it is in relation to the rest of the body, we're going to put a little bit of movement in the head. And so we're simply going to allow the crown of our head up here to slide upwards towards the ceiling. And then we're going to let our nose slide upwards towards the ceiling. And you're very slowly going to just move between those two ranges 4 or 5 times. As you do it, make sure your shoulders don't come off the wall, the head doesn't come off the wall. We're not doing a big movement here, it's just very small. And if it's very uncomfortable for you to get your head back against the wall, perhaps if you have quite a head forward posture or quite a big bend in our necks, then you can simply lie on the floor, face up, with your knees bent so your feet are flat on the floor. And if needed, you can even put a book under your head. If you look back, I've got some other videos on that, but you're simply going to do the same movement, that slight nodding up and down. And with the support of the floor, gravity is taken out of the equation. So it can just make it a bit easier and gentler on your neck to have it back against your head back against the body. And then you can slowly progress to be able to come and do it against the wall. The other thing to think about is where we're moving from. In our neck or cervical spine, we actually have 7 vertebrae. However, a lot of us are only moving from 1 or 2. A good example of this is when I get people to look at the ceiling. What we'd ideally want is a nice opening of all the vertebrae at the front and closing of all of them at the back. But very often I find people will tip their head back and it's like they're moving just from one vertebrae, usually one of the top ones here. And so they're just getting all of that movement from one joint instead of 7. So how do we know if our vertebrae are each working and working together? Well, again, we're going to use our wall for this. You could use the floor if you do find the wall is too intense for you. It's going to be exactly the same movement, but essentially what we're doing is the same movement we did earlier, but slower, more mindfully, and more aware of what other parts of our body are doing. If I was to start to send my nose and chin up, but I just do it as a tipping backwards movement, you can see how my shoulders are coming forwards. My ribcage is like collapsing down. So instead, what I would do is as I start to send my nose upwards, my chin, I want to think of it as going upwards, but almost outwards in front. And this is really opening up the front of my neck and letting each vertebrae slightly close at the back. Versus if I do a backwards tipping motion with my chin, if I think my chin is coming up but back, that's where I'm getting a fold at just one part of the neck. So instead we're very slowly lifting that chin upwards and forwards, but keeping the back of the head on the wall. And that means I can keep my shoulders on the wall too. And then to get the reverse of that movement, we're going to very slowly move our hair out the way first and then really feeling the back of the wall on the back of the head. Slide the back of the head up the wall as if your hair at your crown is being pulled up towards the ceiling. And again, by keeping my head really tight against the wall, it means that all of the back of my neck is getting to open up. Whereas if I let the head even slightly come forward, I've still got the back of my head here on the wall, but the top is coming forward. I'm starting to get a fold here and a tip forward. So it will be the lower vertebrae that are working, and this will all just be staying straight. Instead, I want them to all stretch and open, so I'm keeping as much of the back of my head on the wall as I can. And again, you can slowly just go between those two movements. Repeat it 3 or 4 times. It doesn't have to be much, and they don't have to be huge movements. It can be very small, but I want you to be really intentional and mindful of what you can feel moving in your neck. So hopefully now you've got a better idea of how the head is impacting the neck, why we want it over the body, and also just the difference it makes having all of those vertebrae working versus just 1 or 2. We don't want to be wearing out our joints unnecessarily, so keeping movement throughout the spine, throughout the neck is really important. Thank you for joining me for Movement Monday, and don't forget to subscribe and follow so that you don't miss next week's Movement Monday.